My name is John Overacker, and this is week one, practical assignment number one for my firearms inspection and troubleshooting class. For this particular program, we are going to make this particular weapon, which is a Springfield XD45. We're going to make this weapon safe, and then we're going to go through function testing this firearm. So a couple of things to keep in mind. We are going to keep this pointed in a safe direction at all times. Ammunition has been removed from the workspace. There are some snap caps that I have made up that are on the workbench. These are actually, you can see there's nothing, no primer in them. They're painted in red, so I can definitely differentiate them from live ammunition. So to make this safe, we're going to remove the magazine, the ammunition feeding device. We are going to keep this pointed in a safe direction. We're going to pull the slide fully to the rear. We're going to inspect the chamber and observe that there is no ammunition in the chamber. For my particular firearm, I usually like to rack the slide several times, more or less a double check to make sure that there's no ammunition feeding device and that there's no rounds in the chamber. I'm going to lock the slide all the way to the rear, and now this particular firearm has been made safe for us to work on. The next part to this is that we're going to go through a dry function test of this particular firearm. A couple of things that we are going to keep an eye out and we are going to look at is as I start to pull the slide to the rear here, we are going to watch the particular chamber unlock. So as you can see, the actual tilting barrel is tilting down. And we're going to listen for an audible click sound because this is a striker fired handgun. So we should hear the actual cocking take place. And that's quite positive. You can actually hear that. As we continue to pull the rear, we can check and see that definitely a strong recoil spring on this. As we lock it to the rear, the barrel has tilted down. We can see that here. Then we are going to go ahead and start to pull the slide forward, and we will be able to watch the slide engage and the tilting barrel actually pivot on the locking block, and it should pop up right there. You can see that popping up and locking into place. This particular firearm also has a striker indicator on it, so we can see that the striker did cock. That was that sound that we did hear. And that is essentially it for our dry test. Didn't really see or hear anything out of the ordinary. We were able to see the unlocking, cocking, and then the locking of the chamber. So we're going to move into doing a function test utilizing snap caps. Alright, for this part we are going to check our feeding as part of our function test. So the magazine has been loaded with 2 dummy rounds. Again, you can see the red paint that I put on those dummy rounds that we made, and there is no primer in them. I'm going to insert these into the firearm. We can see that they are in the magazine there. As we release the slide and start to pull it forward, we can see the breech face grabbing the round out of the magazine. We can see it start to pivot up the feed ramp, push into the chamber. We can see that the extractor did catch the rim of the case for this particular case. It's continuing to push forward. Try not to just release this because this recoil spring is quite strong. And we can see that it pushes it into the chamber, and the chamber does lock because this is a tilting barrel, so it tilted up and locked. This particular device here is also our loaded chamber indicator, so that's indicating that there is a round in the chamber. Okay, now that we've tested all of our functions in regards to chambering a round, we are going to now try and check the extracting and the ejecting part of the cycle of operations here. So as we push the slide back, we can see that the barrel unlocks. We can see that the extractor, you should be able to see it there, is pulling on the rear of the rim of the cartridge as it pulls it out of the chamber. And as it's pulling back, we can see that the ejector, which is this pin right here, pushed on the edge of the rim and pushed the cartridge out the side of the ejection port. So it doesn't appear that there's any issues with the extracting and ejecting part of this cycle of operations. Now that we've slow tested all of the cycle of operations of the firearm, the next step is to pretty much do this in live time utilizing snap caps. So we are going to feed our magazine into the firearm with the snap cap. As you can see, the firearm is not cocked, and the barrel was safety test. It was actually made safe, so it is empty. We are going to pull our slide all the way to the rear. Release, we can see cock, and it did load the round. We are going to pull the trigger, and then we are going to pull the slide all the way to the rear, and we went through all of the cycle of operations more or less in real time, and we don't see any apparent issues with the firearm. The next part to this, we are going to test the safety functions of this particular firearm. This handgun does not have a manual safety. In this case, we won't be able to test any of the functions related to that. What we can test is this does have a grip safety as well as a trigger safety, so we should be able to test those. So there is a snap cap that has been loaded into this firearm, as you can see there. So if we do not depress the grip safety but we try to pull the trigger, we should not get a fire. If we push the grip safety in but we do not push the trigger safety, we should not get a fire. We don't. The next thing that we can do is, while pushing the grip safety in, we're going to pull the firearm slightly out of battery. We're going to pull the trigger, and we should not get a fire, which we don't. And there's no decocker for us to worry about or work with on this. The only other safety function that we should check is the striker bar, more or less. So if we give this firearm a slight tap on the rear while it's cocked, hands off the trigger, we shouldn't get a fire, which we don't. So that more or less tests the drop safety involved with the firearm. So for all intents and purposes, the safeties appear to be functioning normally on this particular firearm. That should be it. Thanks.